Hello, my friends. Welcome to this new session where we're going to talk about one more time about one of the most important skills that we have to be teaching our students. In fact, they need to develop this skill in order to be successful in the English language. So welcome to the speaking skill session. Just like listening, of course, speaking can be active and passive. When we're talking about the active speaking skill, is of course when there is a vivid interaction between two or more people, or in other words, between the listener and the speaking. Most of the times, this is one of the most difficult parts for our students to do, to be able to listen and to speak at the same time. Of course, we can have simply good examples in order for us to have our students ready to practice the speaking skills. For example, having live conversations or any meeting, special occasion, or having a conversation on the phone, etc., etc. On the other hand, the passive speaking is when we speak without being interrupted, like for example, when you are giving a public speaking, or simply when you're giving a small presentation in your class. And of course, your classmates or the teacher is not interrupting you. There are important factors that we have to keep in our mind when we're teaching the speaking skill in class. Many of them, of course, are not taken into consideration by teachers, but as simple as they may seem, they have to be taken into consideration in order for us to really develop the speaking skill in our students. For example, the good selection of vocabulary. We may not want to be teaching beginner students with complicated words because instead of having them attracted to the language, they're going to be scared about it and they're going to feel frustrated, so they might quit learning to speak. We also have to teach them the correct pronunciation of words, accurate grammar, nature of the receiver, facial expressions. You know, we have spoken in class about this, that we can speak without voice, and that would be with gestures. How to modulate our voice, our body language, and of course, the posture whenever we're speaking. As for example, here in the image we have on screen, you might think that this guy is being interviewed by an employer, and he's like even using his gestures in order to express whatever he wants to. So it is important for us to incorporate everything when we are speaking, especially for formal or informal situations. When motivating our students to speak the second language, there are different roles and different assets that a teacher must take into consideration, but I'm going to highlight in one that is very important, and it is to encourage our kids or our young learners towards the learning of the language. We have to make sure they feel encouraged to speak it. We need to help them by correcting them, but correcting them doesn't mean to feel them ashamed in front of the rest of their classmates. So it is important for us to keep a balance whenever we are correcting our students when speaking. But indeed, it is important because we are a good role model for them, and we have to take advantage of these important moments in order for them to learn the right pronunciation of words, for example, the right intonation, the right tone of voice, the gestures that they may use, the type of language, if it's formal or informal language. So yes, we have to take into consideration those important details in order for them to learn to speak properly. There are 3 important speaking stages to be taken into consideration when learning and when teaching this in our classes. The number 1, of course, is the presentation stage. When we have to be presenting the topic in our class, we have to make sure that this is meaningful for them, that they are interested in learning the new topic that we want to teach them. And sometimes we do have to be teaching like a boring topic for them. But even though it might seem boring for our students, we creative teachers need to find a way so they feel attracted to the topic, to understand, to make sure that they give their input before we start teaching the lesson. Number 2 is the practice stage. This is the very important moment where our students are going to have the real time for them to practice the language. As we can see here in this image, they might feel fearful, especially when you tell them that they have to speak in front of the class. Wow! This might be a very difficult task for some of them. But if we help them feel confident, if we provide them with a good environment where all students are going to be respecting each other, that's going to be something good for them because we are going to be building them with the right skills for them to be developing the language little by little, to be practicing, and for us to be encourage them to learn more and more. The number 3 stage is the production one. In this stage, of course, it is important for us to take into account different situations, like for example, real life ones, where students are going to be perhaps listening to a talk show, listening to a documentary, and then having a chance to speak about it. Or why not talking about real life situations, like for example, what's their opinion towards about eating healthy, about the political situation in their country, about how to improve communication among students in the class. These different examples are going to help them to feel more secure, to have meaningful experiences for them to practice the language, and, for example, to have real life practice. Another good activity that we could practice with them, for example, would be like pen pals, where they're going to have the chance to meet people who speak English. It doesn't matter if they are not native speakers, but they can be practicing the language with people that are in another countries. So this could be by mail, or this could be through a live conversation, through the internet. I don't know. I mean, there are different ways that we can be using right now for students to really practice it. It is important for us to take into account that these 3 stages, as in the other skills, sometimes they can overlap. They don't necessarily need to follow the same order because it will depend on the purpose of the activity you're planning, the intention you have, the materials are available to you as teacher in order to implement them. What you have to make sure is that you really give students different chances little by little to be exposed for an oral communication, because that's going to help them to really improve their speaking skills. On the other hand, of course, we also have to take into consideration that having a varied range of activities for students to be practicing in class or with classmates or even at home as homework is going to be something very useful. So we can be using different activities depending on their level, if they are beginners, intermediate, or advanced students, so it will depend. So for example, here on screen we can see some activities that we can use and that we have also practiced in our class as sample models, and I'm sure that you have practiced some of them. So I would like you to take a look to the ones that we have here on screen and think which ones you have used, what has been your experience working with them in classes. And if you haven't used any of those, so probably you might want to think of applying one of these ones in your classes this week, so you can practice and have students having real chances for them to speak the language. On the other hand, here we have other activities. I think it will depend. Working with public speaking contests for intermediate or advanced students would be something very awesome if you have really trained them to do so, because you are not only practicing the language, practicing the grammatical skills, but also teaching them to put into practice the public speaking skills, which is something different that we have to take into consideration. So here on the left side of the screen, you can also see another range of vocabularies that you could use with your students to be working with in different scenarios. And I'm sure that that's going to be very useful. And to conclude with today's lesson, guys, I think this is a very important message for us English teachers. The more your students are exposed to the language, the better it will be for them. It cannot be possible to have English teachers teaching their lessons in Spanish. So that is something that it might sound difficult, especially at the beginning or when we are working with beginner students, because it might be frustrating for them, but it's not impossible. And it's up to us teachers to make it possible for them. So have a great day. God bless you all, and I hope to see you in our next lesson. Bye bye.